Hello and welcome to yet another video. This is the first episode of the story where Madara devised a plan. The Yondaime ruined things. Madara devised another plan. One that could never fail. But even the best laid plans of mice and men can go awry, and this one had just run into Konoha's most surprising ninja, Uzumaki Naruto. This story is from Arun 2110. Please support him, her. Please like and subscribe to show your support. Let's get the show started. The smoking corpses of the ANBU captain and his subordinates lay at his feet. The masked figure spat at the leader of the assassins and kicked the mutilated and rapidly cooling body of the captain. They had put up a good fight, but ordinary mortals could not hope to face a god of ninjas and live to tell the tale. Still, what he had read in his praise mind had been intriguing. He would not have thought that even one such as the Yondaime could have pieced such disparate and seemingly random sets of data to discern the truth behind the veil of illusion. But the Hokage had. This turn of events was intolerable. His plans had yet to ripen and secrecy was paramount at this stage. What to do? He asked himself. His razor-sharp mind processed the constraints on his person and the tools at his disposal against the known capabilities of his enemies, and the answer came to him in a spark of inspiration. They were never going to expect this. 3 days later, flanked by his security detail, Sarutobi, the newly reinstated Hokage stood, surveying the scene of the recently concluded battle. Before him, the badly overworked personnel of the Konoha Medics Corps, helped by even more badly exhausted ninja and supported by civilian volunteers, cleared the debris in the search for survivors of the Kyubi no Yuko's attack. Through sheer luck, the will of fire and the Yondaime's supreme sacrifice, his ninja had managed the impossible. They had defeated a beast with the power to level mountains and drown entire nations at a whim and saved the village. But this day of glory was also a day of tragedy. Hundreds of ninja lay dead at his feet and hundreds more were so badly wounded that they would have to be retired from active duty. Husbands had lost their wives and wives their husbands and children their parents. And on top of it all, the hero was dead, as was his wife and his legacy. The old man shook his head. He knew the trials and tribulations that young Uzumaki Naruto would face as he grew up. The child would be hated for his prisoner and the fear it would forever instill in the hearts and minds of those who'd lived through this day in Konoha. Such was human nature and such was the way of the world. It would be better for little Naruto to grow away from the village, preferably under the watchful eyes of either of his two loyal but wayward students, but one lived in the past unable and unwilling to heal her heart's wounds and the other had a duty to the nation. Duty that was supremely important and absolutely necessary to keep their opportunistic neighbors at bay and ward off disaster now that the village was significantly weakened. From a logical standpoint, there were other expatriates who could be trusted, of course, but as Hokage, Sarutobi could not chance Naruto and his prisoner falling into the hands of another village. All that was irrelevant, however, for from an emotional standpoint, Naruto was his father's legacy and thus, was Konoha's as well. And he, the Sandaime, would be damned before he banished the fourth son from the village his parents had died to save. Sarutobi turned from the field. He had a meeting with the council to plan for the future in a little while. But before he departed, he made a solemn vow to himself. The survivors may hate the boy and fear and loathe him, but as his first official act as Hokage, he would ensure that the hatred would die with them. Elsewhere, as the sun set over the horizon, the masked figure fumed. Of all the results he had expected when he unleashed the Kyubi, he had not expected this. What was it with the damned village and its Hokages, anyways? In one stroke, his trump card had been neutralized. Granted, he and it had been defeated once before, but that was because his accursed opponent's bloodline was the perfect counter to the ultimate weapon of his own. But now, it was clear. The beast was not invincible. If one village could produce two nins with the power to defeat the Kyubi within the span of 100 years, it was no longer enough to depend on the creature alone. Not that it was his to command anymore. The Yondaime, ridding him of the most powerful tool in his repertoire, had sealed it into a newborn and handed over its reins to his most hated enemies. Perhaps he should have selected another course of action. No, he forcefully told himself. There was no point second-guessing what was done and over with. Reality was what it was. The strong did not shy from facing whatever ugly truth the world threw at them. To do so was a sign of weakness, and he was not weak. He would not weaken himself by denying fact and deluding himself with fantasies. If his enemies controlled the 9 tails, he would control the other tailed beasts. He would unleash his Akatsuki on the world and they would reap a crop of blood and death as never before. 100 years from now. No, 1,000 years from now, they would whisper in fear about the vengeance he wreaked on his foes for sullying his honor so long ago. Let the rain of blood begin, thought the masked stranger as the last rays of sun faded from the land and night unfurled its dark shroud across the land. Sarutobi heaved a sigh and blew smoke out in a slow stream, weighing his favorite pipe in his right hand as he contemplated the faces of the other Hokages carved into the hillside. 7 years had passed since the fateful day since the Kyuubi brought Konoha to its knees. There had been some very tough times in between, but the village had weathered them like it had the Shinobi Wars with its ever-watchful ninja standing guard at the walls. During those 7 years, the rapid expansion program that the Hokage had initiated after the Kyuubi disaster had paid off nicely and the ranks of Shinobi had bounced back to what the Army of the Fire Country's mission statement called for in times of peace. Even though compromises were made at the start, what with the threat of war looming over the horizon, the quality of the soldiery had improved handily over time thanks to rigorous training and Darwinian selection. Now, both the civilian and the military establishments were finally back to their pre-attack levels. In short, the future looked bright for Konoha no Sato with most of the uncertainties and fears of the past few years gone. Bright enough, in fact, that Sarutobi had started entertaining thoughts of spending more than a few hours every week with his toddler grandson. Naturally, the aged Hokage thought with a trace of weariness, spies had to overhear talk of Naruto and his prisoner. It was the worst-case scenario really, for the spies had not been from any of the satellite villages of Konoha or nations allied with it. No, they had been infiltrators from Kyumo, which so soon after the Hyuga incident may have been enough to start a war if the victim had been anyone other than the village pariah. Sarutobi's grip on his precious pipe tightened a wee bit as his fingers clenched. The Hyuga incident and the tragedy that befell that clan in its aftermath should have been enough of a wake-up call to tighten security, but the latest event proved that it was as lax as ever. The Hokage promised himself that in the next few days, after both the military police and the ANBU interrogation submitted independent reports on the attempt on Naruto, heads were going to roll, literally. God have mercy on those suspected of treason or gross incompetence, because none was going to be forthcoming from the office of the Hokage. Infiltrators should not have been able to come within a mile of both the legacy of the Yondaime and the heir to the Hyuga, much less get within arm's length of both. Thankfully, fortune had smiled on Naruto as it had on little Hinataken, and his abductors had the misfortune of dealing with not one but 2 Uchihas who were in the neighborhood. And not just any 2 scions of that prestigious clan either. From preliminary reports, young Itachi and his cousin Shursui had heard the sounds of fight put up by Naruto's guard, and had rushed to the scene. Thereafter, against the might of one of 3 great Jujutsu, the kidnappers had not stood a chance. Still, they could have curtailed their natural aggression and been less flashy, Sarutobi thought with mild irritation. The 2 Uchiha had gone about the business with the same bloody-mindedness that was fast earning them a reputation among shinobi ranks. The Hokage's annoyance had nothing to do with worries about their craftsmanship. From experience, he knew that the 2 nin in question were as professional as they come. No, what irked him had to do with their flamboyance and their lack of foresight. Whatever the definition of prudence and thoughtfulness were, cutting a man into so many pieces with a blade that it literally rained blood on a child was definitely not it. He had half a mind to take the punks to task and throw the box their ears for that one. Hokage-sama, the boy is ready to see you, the Chunin. Stand-in for the Hokage's aide, who'd called in sick that day, announced. Bring him in. Send in Itachi and Shursui as well. Send for Ibiki. I'll see him after this meeting. Yes, Hokage-sama, the Chunin said and withdrew, but not before showing in the three boys. Sarutobi bade the trio sit with a wave of his hand and considered them. The usually exuberant Naruto was subdued, but that was to be expected given the ordeal he'd endured. On any other day, the Hokage would have been hard-pressed to resist the urge to pull at the blonde's cheeks for his squeaky clean appearance and the wide-eyed look he was shooting at his two companions. The blonde runt was forever dirty, which given his lack of playing partners his age was not easy to explain. Given the events of the day, however, the Hokage was sure that he did not want to do that. While kids were stronger than adults in many regards, with their remarkable ability to bounce back from things that would kill or destroy older men and women, even they could not recover after bathing in blood. Not without severe long-term psychological impact, at least. Oh yes, he needed to have a long talk with the boy before the day was out and then have another talk with the caretaker at the orphan's home to keep an eye on him for some time to come. The two Uchihas, on the other hand, sat calm and collected. Itachi was seemingly oblivious to the boy staring wide-eyed at him, whereas Shursui returned the stare with a friendly smile. Sarutobi noted Naruto's eyes widen even further at the smile and felt a pang of regret for a childhood stolen away for the greater good. "Little Naruto, are you all right?" he asked, turning his gaze back to the boy. The boy nodded, shyly, as he was often wont when in the presence of others before the Hokage. "Yeah," he ventured softly. He turned to Shursui. "What's your name, Nizan?" The Hokage burst into a smile. This was not going to be one of Naruto's shy outings, after all. "I'm Uchiha Shursui, Naruto-kun." "Why are your eyes black now?" "They were red this afternoon." The meeting continued on in that vein. The Hokage had decided even before he called for the meeting that its sole purpose was to introduce Naruto to his rescuers so that he could see them as humans, which would go a long way towards reducing the trauma of the day. He would get the details from the after-action report later. From all appearances, it seemed to be working too, for Naruto became more and more animated through the course of the hour and even went so far as to crawl into Shursui's lap once. The smile the Hokage flashed the young Uchihas held genuine warmth. Thus when the meeting came to a close at the end of the hour. "Gigi," Naruto said in a timid voice after the door closed behind the two departing ninjas, "I was afraid." The third shot a tender look at the child seated before him. Sitting on that oversized chair with that vulnerable look, Naruto was picture incarnate of a child afraid and all alone with no one to help him face his fears. The old man's heart melted at the sight and he rose from his seat. He picked the boy up in his hands, groaning inwardly at his creaking old bones, and nested Naruto on his waist. He wiped away the tears, which had started as soon as he was lifted up, and patted the boy gently until the sniffling died down. Then, pulling away a little, he made eye contact with the youngster, tweaking the boy's nose and tousling his hair one after the other with his free hand. Afterwards, he took Naruto to his favorite ramen stand and then, seeing as it was evening, to the park. The Uzumaki chased dragonflies under the Hokage's watchful eyes for some time before returning to Sarutobi's lap. "Gigi." "Yes, Naruto." "What happened today?" "Some bad men came to take you away from the village." Naruto's eyes widened. "Really?" "Really," Sarutobi nodded for emphasis. "Itachikan and Shisuikan were protecting you." "They were scary," Naruto whispered. "Who?" "Itakiniyazan and Shizuiniyazan. They moved so fast." "They're ninjas," the third reminded the boy. There was so much icky blood, Naruto's whisper dropped even further. He repeated his earlier words, unconsciously wiping his hands on his trousers as if to remove body fluids. "I was so afraid." "They were performing their duty, Naruto-kun. Ninja guard the village." "Why?" Sarutobi considered. How to describe why doughty men stood guard at the gates shielding the civilian populace from the darkness beyond? As young as he was, Naruto could not, understand the sacrifice and love involved in the act. But the boy's question touched the very heart of the issue. How best to describe so complex a philosophy in such a way that a child of 7 could understand? After a few seconds, the third had the answer. To protect their precious ones. They do what they do so that their precious ones can live happily. Am I precious? Naruto asked with quivering lips. His eyes brimmed with unshed tears at the question, and Sarutobi's heart broke anew at the pain reflected in his blue eyes. Yes, Naruto. You're my precious person. The boy burst into tears then for the second time in the day, hugging the third tightly. Sarutobi stroked his hair and whispered little words of love into the boy's ears as he cried. When Naruto's sobs finally wound down, he wiped his teary eyes with the back of his hand even as the Hokage cleaned his dripping nose with the sleeve of his formal robe. By this time, it was getting late, but Sarutobi wasn't concerned. He had long since cancelled all his appointments for the day, and so, it was not as if he would have to meet an emissary or an official with booger on his person. But that thought was at best fleeting and was meaningless really, since the third loved the boy so. Gigi, Naruto said sometime later as they sat under the fading sunlight. I want to be a ninja. Sarutobi turned Naruto around to face him and tousled his sun-kissed hair. It was not hard to follow Naruto's thoughts really. This was the youngster's way of showing his love back to the third. The seasoned old campaigner's heart grew even heavier as emotions surged in his chest. Greater love than the willingness to lay down one's life for loved ones, there was not. Yes, you will, he said, solemnly, answering the unasked question. He would enroll the boy into the academy tomorrow and maybe gift him a few scrolls on taijutsu, seeing as how his eyes had lit up slightly when he talked about speed. He pulled Naruto close to his chest and gazed at the evening star in the sky above. Yes, you will. 5 years later. It had been an eventful 5 years, so to speak. Naruto whistled to himself as he put the final touches on his magnum opus. It was the culmination of 3 weeks of planning and 5 years of accumulated experience, but the effort and the pains were worth it. Surely, after this, his name would be remembered as the greatest prankster in the history of Konoha. He chuckled at the thought before bursting into a full-belly laugh. Yes, that ought to put a burr up their hairy asses, he thought as he contemplated his art and laughed some more. Truly, the Hokage monument had never looked so good. He could not wait to see their reactions, and so, he sat atop the Yondaime's head and waited as twilight became morning and Konoha awoke to a day of infamy. Or fame, he reminded himself, if you look at things from a certain perspective, that is. Sure enough, as citizens started coming out to start their day, cries of indignation filled the air along with the occasional belly laugh from grisly veterans. The squad of Chunin sent to apprehend that prankster brat, as the Hokage put it, found Naruto on the monument half an hour later. The leader of the squad shook his head and chuckled as Naruto carved a slice off the apple he was munching and offered it to him. Later, after the customary talk from Irika and the Chunin captain, Naruto lay hogtied on Irika's table before his classmates in a rather good imitation of a roasted pig with an apple in his mouth in place of the gag. The finals are tomorrow, Irika announced brightly, patting Naruto. I had originally planned to give you the day off, but thanks to the little piggy here, I've decided that you all have way too much time on your hands. The class groaned as one, with even Shikamaru joining the crowd. It fills me with great joy to hear your enthusiastic cries, Irika shouted over the cacophony. Now, assemble before me. We're going to rehearse the henge. The rehearsal went as well as could be expected. Everyone managed tolerable to reasonably good henges, though some of the children looked exhausted by even that slight chakra expenditure. Irika noted their names to fail them in the final exam as part of the weeding. Having chewed through the apple, Naruto oinked when it was Sakura's turn and earned himself an earful from both the young Haruno and Irika for his efforts. Finally, it was Naruto's turn. Oiroku no Jutsu. Needless to say, the class burst into laughter. Kiba and Chuji drooled at Naruto's delectable derriere before they both realized where that train of thought was taking them. At end of day, the two boys decided as one in their minds, Naruto was going to pay for his mischief. Naruto, for his part, found their laughs distinctly unnerving. The next day, Naruto walked into class late with several scrapes on his face and hands. Kiba and Chuji were already at their seats with mild black eyes on their faces. Akamaru barked at Naruto, drawing his attention, and he grinned cheekily at his attackers. That plan of theirs sure did not work out right. Irika, flanked by Mizuki on his left, walked in a little later. "All right, class," Irika announced once the hustle and bustle of the class died down. "Throughout this year, you have been graded on your academic performance with tests and quizzes. There are those among you who've made passing grades already. But being a shinobi out on the field is about more than just book smarts. So, today, as with every class that came before you and every class that'll come after, we're going to have a day-long series of tests on your practical skills from taijutsu to genjutsu. File out to the training ground and wish you all the best of luck." One after other, the class of nervous kids assembled on the training ground. The exam began with tests of proficiency at throwing kunai and shuriken and slowly graduated to the other shinobi arts. Even though genjutsu had been taught in the academy since the founding of the village, this was the first year genjutsu evasion was being tested as part of the graduation exam. Many failed that part of the test, including Naruto, Kiba and Chuji, though Akamaru passed with flying colors. And then, it was time for the tests of ninjutsu and taijutsu. Well, it was not two separate tests, but a single one. A full contact, no-holds-barred match between students paired off against each other at the behest of the Hokage who had dropped by. The spars went as well as can be expected with children 12 years old until it was Naruto's turn. The girls squealed as fangirls do when Sasuke's name was announced as Naruto's partner. The number one student against the academically mediocre and least popular blonde? Surely, the winner of the fight was a no-brainer. This, passed the thought through the mind everyone gathered, was going to be decided in a pinch. All except Kiba, Chuji and the Hokage, that is. So it came to be that Sasuke and Naruto faced off against each other in the Genin graduation exam, and as the two slipped into their stances, the Uchiha prodigy took a dig at his classmate. "Better luck with the next year's graduation exam, dobe." Naruto smirked. "Hold on, Sasuke team, the ride is about to get wild," he said arrogantly and moved. Naruto's speed immediately put Sasuke on the defensive. The blonde came in with what was for all intense, a straight cross to the Uchiha's face with his right hand. The Osamani hours Sasuke had spent training in blocks and counters worked to his advantage. His hand came up to block the blow, but Naruto was already reacting. It was then that Sasuke's thoughts caught up with his reflexes and he knew that Naruto had planned for this exact reaction, but it was too late. Naruto's left leg spun in a kick that penetrated Sasuke's guard and impacted his ribs full force. Sasuke was thrown away, but managed to turn his uncontrolled fall into a magnificent skid against the dirt with skillful use of his hands. Fangirls and assorted spectators gasped. The Hokage nodded to himself. This was exactly as he had expected. "Is the dobe too fast for you?" Naruto smirked, sliding into another stance. Sasuke spit on the ground and dusted the dirt off his shirt. He cracked his neck, rolled his shoulders and smirked back in return. "Let's see you handle this," he said, rushing Naruto. But Naruto could. The two exchanged blows at speeds that astonished the Genin Wanabes, but it was clear within the first few minutes that Naruto had the upper hand. He could shift gears at will from Sasuke's level to somewhere above it, whereas to the trained observer, Sasuke had to keep firing on all cylinders just to keep up with his opponent. After a particularly brutal exchange, the two separated. Iruka moved to stop the fight, and it was no longer for a spar, but the Hokage put a hand on the teacher's shoulder and shook his head. The boys had to get this out of their system now, or they would do it on their own later with no one around to ensure that things don't really get out of hand. The two turned back, prompted by a gasp from several of Sasuke's fangirls. Their eyes settled on the Uchiha and widened, for in the center of the ring stood Sasuke with two tomo in each of his eyes. The last survivor has awakened his family's most precious possession. Naruto grinned toothily at the sight. So, you have those eyes. If you're related to Shizuiniazan and his friend, it's no wonder you improved so fast in the span of a single fight. Sasuke looked confused for a second and then grinned on realizing the import of Naruto's words. Now that he thought about it, his reflexes had improved steadily over the course of the fight. With the Sharingan awakened, he was that much closer towards avenging his clan's massacre. And to think the dobe forced its expression on me. At that moment, the last loyal Uchiha found a new and profound respect for his opponent grow in his heart. Perhaps. You have lost the match, Uzumaki, he said without his usual arrogance. Nothing can withstand the might of the Sharingan. Famous last words, Naruto replied and blurred into motion faster than ever before. Sasuke's Sharingan spun and he knew what Naruto was going to do even before Naruto did. But Naruto was even faster than he was before, how dare the dobe play with him? And Sasuke found to his disgust that while his mind worked fast enough, his body could not. Was this the worth of all the training he'd done? If he could not defeat this commoner with no clan to call his own, how could he defeat his accursed brother, who was possibly the greatest genius born in the most powerful ninja clan ever? Still, there was a hole the size of a truck in Naruto's all-out attack, and if he timed it right, he could KO the blonde into tomorrow and manage to pull a victory from the jaws of defeat. But whatever happened, he was sure of two things. 1, he had a sparring partner who was worth his salt, and 2, he was going to work on his speed like there was no tomorrow. Naruto's punch found its target unerringly even as Sasuke's fist came up in a non-regulation haymaker that would have ended the battle if it had connected. Sasuke knew that the fight was as good as lost as soon as he missed and Naruto's fist connected with his solar plexus. The excruciatingly painful blow knocked the breath out of the Uchiha. Still, even as he folded and flew back from the force of the punch, Sasuke's hands sped through the hand seals for the Gokakyu no Jutsu faster than they ever had before. But there was no air in his chest to blow at his opponent. In desperation, as the chakra gathering in his thorax struggled for release, he forcefully ripped it out of his lungs. The action, combined with his inexperience at chakra manipulation, burst the air sacs within and burned his airways. But the resulting mild explosion of air combined with the aspirated blood was enough to produce a fireball tinged red. Naruto knew he was done for as soon as Sasuke blew the fireball. 6 feet separated him and the Uchiha at most, and that was 5 feet less too short to kill his forward momentum and retreat in time. Of course, he reasoned all this in his subconscious, but one need not be a rocket scientist to figure out there was simply no escape. XXXX water dripped from pipes in bad need of repair. Ankle-deep water flowed leisurely under his feet. Disoriented, he looked around and saw that he was in a tunnel, possibly the sewers of Konoha, of some sort. This struck him as weird as he had been facing a ball of burning death just a moment before. What happened to it? Where was he? His mind delegated all thought to the background as he espied a huge door with bars of wood so thick he didn't think he could wrap his arms around them. A piece of paper was glued to the wood with the word "seal" calligraphed on it in kanji. Malevolent red eyes stared at him through the bars, seething with hatred and contempt. "Worthless brat," a voice as ageless as the stars in the sky above boomed in deep basso. It was so powerful that the water under his feet and around the bars of the door rippled. "I wish I could get my hands on you to torture and maim. Be gone." A wave of crimson water that burned to touch from pollution rushed out the door and Witnesses to the fight felt a terrible, killing intent wash over them. Many of the genin collapsed under the weight of that insane desire to kill and render, even though it lasted only a fraction of a second. Some even voided their bowels and wet their pants in fear. Others shook so much that their knees knocked and their teeth clattered. Two of the most shaken children in the crowd would resign their commissions later that same day. All said and done, it was not the proud start to their careers the genin hopefuls had wished for. The center of the arena exploded just before the fireball hit Naruto. The children were too frightened by the short-lived spike of killing intent to even so much as twitch at the fireworks, though most of them were blown off their feet with abrasions and lacerations. Chunins were made of sterner stuff, however, and Irika gasped aloud. He was half afraid for his student and half fearful that the demon that slew his parents had escaped the cage that had shielded the world from its malevolence for so long. Sarutobi and Sasuke were the only ones to show no reaction to the explosion and the burst of power before it at all. Sarutobi because he had routinely faced foes who oozed killing intent as powerful, if not more so than what he'd felt just now, and Sasuke because he was too busy flying through the air trying to breathe with burnt lungs. The former because he knew the commander could never show fear in the face of mortal danger lest his troops lose hope and surrender the will to fight, and the latter because he was too busy choking to death to care. Sasuke hit the ground with a thud that was audible over the clatter of the dirt, pebbles, clods and sundry material thrown into the air as they rained down all around. He skidded and rolled against the debris-strewn ground and came to rest, sprawled against the school foundation. The Hokage did not so much as spare a glance at the Uchiha heir. From experience, he had tried something similarly stupid when he was the Uchiha's age himself. He knew that the boy was not really choking to death. Yes, the Uchiha would recover and under the administrations of a skilled medical practitioner, would not even lose any of his lung capacity, which would have ended his life as a ninja. He was more interested in Naruto, whose escape he had followed with his skilled eyes as the boy flitted to a tree on the other side of the courtyard. The Hokage's hidden retinue of ANBU appeared with their swords unsheathed at his side at that moment. The one on the rightmost flank leveled his sword and made to charge as part of the opening gambit, but Sarutobi barked the order to stand down. His soldiers would not be needed today. At least, not to kill and or die for the village. Perched on a branch, Naruto sported a shite-eating grin on his face that he proudly displayed to the whole wide world. He had shown that prissy Uchiha who's who and what's what, now, hadn't he? Quite unlike his smile, Naruto's eyes were only for Sarutobi, who gave a slight nod of acknowledgement, which was all that the Hokage could spare for the moment. The promised ramen treat for graduation would come later. Call in medical support for Sasuke, Sarutobi told the commander of his guards. The captain turned to his lieutenant, but the ANBU officer was already on the wireless asking for medics. He relayed the information on both the civilian and military frequencies while two of his squad mates rushed to administer first aid to the Uchiha, who was frothing at his lips, but generally breathing. Naruto chose to acknowledge his own pain at that moment. The hits that Sasuke had scored smarted like hell and his legs burned. He swayed on his feet as a wave of dizziness hit him out of nowhere. His eyes rolled in his head and he fell off the branch head first. If it were not for the ANBU who caught him, he would later acknowledge, the career of one Uzumaki Naruto, aspiring Hokage and #1 most surprising ninja of Konoha no Sato would have met an untimely end right then and there. The rumor would spread through shinobi ranks and would contribute to his legend in years to come that the smile he wore never left the brat's face, however, and unlike many of the rest, this one rumor was based on fact. The two boys lay sedated on their hospital beds. Sasuke had an oxygen mask on him and Naruto had an four attached to his right arm. The mask was mostly a precaution for the former and the four to help with dehydration for the latter. The two elder nin who stood at the foot of their beds noted the troubled expressions on the face of both patients and the physical restraints to restrict their freedom of movement. The younger of the two visitors checked the case histories for both boys in turn, nodding thoughtfully at the notes within. Apparently, both were troubled sleepers whose rest was regularly interrupted by night terrors. "So, these are my students," he said. "Assuming you'll pass them, yes. They have potential," Kakashi admitted freely. He had heard of their graduation fight, as had probably the rest of the village by now. They're also the war orphans of their class. Naruto has had little love showered on him but plenty of hatred and much coldness. His life and the attempted kidnapping in his childhood have made him mentally scarred and morally unbalanced. Sasuke, while being admired by those around him, has had it as bad and is even worse off. My fears that the cruelty inflicted on him by his brother will return to haunt us all may still come true. There are those who argue that neither of these boys belong on the lines. Vocally for the former and quietly for the latter, I might add, Kakashi replied, fishing for the Hokage's thoughts on the issue. The Hokage smiled. "My boss is the daimyo and he knows better than to tell me how to run his ninja corps. I would that the civilian figureheads in this village were as wise as he said, shooting a sly glance at Kakashi. "Does that satisfy you?" "Yes. Hokage-sama." "Good, because I have no doubt that the boys will blossom under the right guidance. They're both of the best crop this village has had in years. It'd be a crime to waste their potential, but I don't want them out on the field if they aren't ready. They may be unpolished gems, but they're also flawed. Exposing them to the shinobi world too soon may break them or have them turn rogue. They need to be nurtured carefully with the right blend of wisdom and yet, firmly guided so that they don't stray from the path. They have to be taught strength and at the same time, loyalty. Naruto has the latter in plenty, as does Sasuke, but both have very little of it to the village. This is why I'm putting them under your tutelage. Teach them loyalty and true courage. Do not go easy on them." "I won't." "The third member?" The Hokage blew out a puff of smoke. "I'll be going over the list with Chunon's Irika and Mizuki in a little while to decide on the third member of Team 7. You'll know by the end of the day." "That'll be all, Kakashi." "Hokage-sama, with all due respect, I object to including Haruno Sakura in the same team as those boys." "Reasons?" Chunin Mizuki, the Sandaime asked, unperturbed. "It would unbalance the teams," Hokage-sama, Mizuki replied. "The suggested Team 7 would have the two best students in theoretical knowledge in Sasuke and Sakura, and the two best students in applied knowledge in Naruto and Sasuke," Irika added. "And the problem with that is? It makes Team 7 much stronger than the other teams," Mizuki replied. "And the problem with that is?" the Hokage asked, digging further. He leaned back in his chair with his arms on the armrest and his fingers intertwined at nose level as he waited for the teachers to explain their arguments in depth. "It would adversely affect the morale and motivation of the other teams. They'll believe that we're playing favorites. This will lead them to conclude there's something innately unworthy about them that made us favor Team 7 over them. My students don't need that kind of negative reinforcement at this stage in their careers, when they're so precocious. That fight between Naruto and Sasuke destroyed a lot of confidence and Team 7's composition will destroy what remains of it." "Well reasoned, Chunin Irika. But my decision stands." "But, Hokage-sama." "But nothing," the Hokage interrupted in a mild reprimand. "Ultimately, your duty is to follow orders. My orders and the daimyo's." Irika mentally flinched at the Hokage's words. The gentle old man was never harsh with anyone during discussions without good reason. But for the life of him, Irika could not imagine what those reasons were. Consequently, he shot an inquisitive glance at the aged commander. "There are several faults in both your arguments. Here's one: unlike what you believe, the other teams will be endangered if I swap one of their members with any of the three. Sakura, Sasuke, and Naruto are too unbalanced to work in teams, but each of the three brings different skills to the table that when put together will be synergistic. I want the two of you to figure out what those skills are and I want a 2-page report on my table by lunch tomorrow." The two Chunin looked at each other in confusion. Reports? For this? They were not school children, were they? The Hokage chuckled at their flummoxed expressions. Surely, you did not think that you had learned all there is to learn about the shinobi world, have you? He asked. Think of this as preparation for future commands. The two nodded. Good. You two have also forgotten that Team 7 have yet to pass their Jounin Mentor's graduation test. You say that as if you expect them to fail, Hokage-sama? Irika asked in a curious voice. Fail? Not exactly, no. But their mentor Jounin Hatake Kakashi is very exacting. He has yet to pass a single graduating class assigned him. Then, nothing, the Hokage interrupted, much less harshly than before. Assumption is the bane of all shinobi. Teams like the proposed Team 7 have managed to graduate and bloom under ardent mentors before. There has been at least one such team in every generation since the founding of the village. My mentors felt, and I do, too, that we're very lucky as a village to have it happen so frequently in Konoha when it happens rarely, if ever at all, in the other villages. I expect that report without fail tomorrow afternoon. Dismissed, XXXX. The sun on his face woke Naruto. He stretched and yawned in the hospital bed and turned to face Sleeping Beauty beside him. Only, Sasuke was awake. Wide awake, in fact, and staring at Naruto with a peculiar look on his face. Naruto scratched the spot where he had the four before and glared at the Uchiha in return. Seconds ticked by as both stubbornly waited for the other to break eye contact and admit defeat. Never one for patience, the exercise pissed off Naruto, who was already irritable in the mornings to begin with. Finally, he huffed and broke eye contact, eliciting a slight smirk from Sasuke at the small victory. What do you want, Uchiha? Naruto asked grumpily. You're good, Sasuke replied. Yeah, I totally kicked your ass. A frown marred Sasuke's face at the boast. Naruto noticed and smiled proudly. Yeah, I own you. Uzumaki Naruto, class nobody, owns the great Uchiha Sasuke. Anger flashed in Sasuke's face for a brief moment and Naruto saw within it, the crazy animal barely restrained and carefully hidden under a facade of aloofness. He burst into laughter at the revelation and continued without giving Sasuke time to frame a reply, oh, this is great. You're crazy. Under that detached exterior of yours, you're as insane as I am. The look on Sasuke's face was askance. Tell me, Sasuke, Naruto's voice dropped to a whisper even as his eyes met the Uchiha's in direct challenge, how often does the desire to kill strike you? This time, it was Sasuke who broke eye contact. Every day, he whispered back, looking into infinity. Then strongly, as if he dared the other to challenge him, every second, every minute, every hour of every day. That's how often. I'm an avenger and I live to kill one man. Naruto stared back at Sasuke for what seemed like hours, but was in fact only a few seconds and finally chuckled. I pity the bastard who pissed you off. But you haven't answered my question. What do you want? Strength. Power. To kill that man, Sasuke replied, his voice now devoid of emotion as a haunted look dawned in his eyes. I want to train with you. Naruto bit his lips in thought. He knew he wasn't very smart, but even he could guess what the Uchiha was asking of him and how steep a price it would exact on his mind. The desire to be fastest had been stamped on his soul after his close encounter of the disemboweling kind followed by the bath in blood. His physical speed was what kept the mental demons at bay during the night and peace during the day. Training with him, Sasuke, with his Sharingan, would gain that swiftness faster than you could say boo. And without that sense of safety guaranteed by his speed, Naruto knew he would go crazy with fear. You ask a lot, he sighed, weighing his options. Possibly more of me than I can bear to lose and live with any semblance of sanity. Sasuke nodded but did not reply. Finally, Naruto sighed in defeat. Refusing wasn't really a choice, as Sasuke would learn the speed with or without Naruto's help. The Uchiha would get many chances to see the latter in action in the coming weeks and months, after all. Alright, but it has to be an exchange. My speed for your jutsu. Sasuke, who'd expected something akin to this, smiled. Done. The last of the teams but Team 7 filed out with their sensei as the three genin stared daggers at their backs. It had been roughly half an hour since Irika and Mizuki announced the teams, and already, Team 7 were grinding their teeth in impatience, not knowing that they were doomed to wait another 2 hours for their wayward teacher. At first, the three sat silently, each lost in their own thoughts. Or rather, Naruto and Sasuke were lost in their own thoughts while Sakura made dreamy eyes at the Uchiha. Eventually, Naruto thumped the bench in annoyance and jumped over it to the blackboard. He grabbed the pieces of chalk lying around and without warning, wound up and threw at Sasuke, who had followed his teammates' actions with a disinterested look on his face. Obsidian eyes flashed crimson speckled with pitch-dark teardrops, and an open palm shot between the chalk and the target, intercepting it. Naruto, what do you think you're doing, throwing that at Sasuke-kun? Sakura shouted in annoyance, snapping out of the pleasant daydream she had been having about the Uchiha and rising to her feet. Naruto shot her a look full of loathing and contempt in return. Without seeming to, he observed Sasuke's reaction to their teammates' interference. Out of the corner of his eyes, Sakura ground her teeth at being treated like dirt and made to take a step forward to berate the Uzumaki at length when Sasuke shoved past her, clutching Naruto's projectile in his hand. Yeah, Sasuke-kun, go and show him what happens when he messes with you, inner Sakura cheered. Sasuke-kun, Sakura said aloud, ignore him. He's annoying. Sasuke stopped mid-step and turned to regard her. Sakura flinched at the look of utter disdain in his eyes. No, he murmured loud enough so that his words reached her ears, he's not annoying. You are. Of all the things Sakura expected to issue from Sasuke's lips, those words were the last. Why would Sasuke-kun say that? She asked herself. Perhaps, a small part of her mind whispered in return, because I am. Never before had the contempt Sasuke had for her been so blatant. Or rather, Sakura supposed, never before had his scorn been so great as to break through the veiled outlook she had of the world. She sat down and shook her head in a daze, trying very hard to accept this new reality. She knew she had burned too many bridges pursuing Sasuke. She had destroyed her friendship with Ino and her other friends for that very reason. He was, in fact, her only friend, not that he ever spoke to her for any reason other than to put her down, which just goes to show how sad her life was. And after all she had done, to see him treat her the way he did. But why, she asked herself. What had changed between Sasuke and Naruto to turn them into playmates in the here and now? The only incident involving the two had been the much gossiped about graduation fight. Could that be the reason? Could it be that Sasuke-kun favors Naruto because the idiot defeated him? It can't be the reason, could it? No, I remember how Sasuke-kun changed the way he looked at Naruto even during the fight. Like most of the other genin, Sakura had not been able to follow the action in the second half of the Sparta-Tweza battle, but she had observed how the two opponents had handled themselves during the frequent passes between exchanges. Sasuke's carriage had undergone a very big change after he awakened his bloodline. Is that the reason then? Is it because Naruto was powerful enough to force the expression of the Sharingan? The last question felt right, as if it were the closest to the mark. Sakura instinctively grasped at the most important idea in that question was power. Sasuke respected Naruto because Naruto was powerful and she, sadly, was not. Blinking the tears that had brimmed in her eyes at Sasuke's words, Sakura took a deep breath, feeling petulant and betrayed. If she was to be teammates with these two demons masquerading as boys, and she did not doubt that they were monsters anymore having experienced their cruelty firsthand, then she would need to be strong. She imagined, as her thoughts took a darker turn, that they would throw her to the wolves if they thought they could gain the least advantage in the fight. With these and other dark thoughts in her mind and her chin supported by her hands clasped together over the bench, Sakura remained thus. An air of gloom hung around her and she shot ugly looks at the two boys playing/training with the chalk. Boys being boys, Sasuke and Naruto were totally absorbed in their game and were completely oblivious to all this until Kakashi walked in. "Yo!" Kakashi said, announcing himself, "Meet me in the roof in 5xxxx, do you want to become powerful ninja?" Kakashi asked them as soon as his three genin were seated. Team 7 nodded separately as individuals. Yes, they wanted power, but for their own reasons. The Jounin made silent note of their lack of unity. "I can give you your dreams. But it'll require hard work, courage and discipline. It'll require pushing yourself beyond your limits. You'll have to learn to master yourself before you ever learn to dominate your enemy. It'll mean broken bones, and a heavy price in blood, sweat and pain. Pain and misery will become your constant companions." Nods. Kakashi held up his hand, knowing for certain that the genin did not understand the harshness of the training regimen. "You're not thinking. Think and understand that the training I'll give you will be pure torture. Ask yourself if you have the necessary courage and the strength of will to become a strong shinobi of the hidden leaf. Only once you're sure, give me your answer." Again, the children nodded. Immediately. Kakashi knew they did not really understand his warnings, but that was not the real requirement here. Only the fact that they agree to his training was. And that training begins now. So, the Jounin drawled, pulling out a book to read and leaning against the rail on the roof, "Let's introduce ourselves. Who wants to go first?" Team 7 stared at the picture of the half-naked woman on the front cover of the book. After the solemn speech only a few seconds back, they were shocked at Kakashi's conduct, which was completely at odds with his words. Consequently, no one volunteered to go first and there was pin-drop silence. Well, not exactly. A dark barked 2 blocks away and a crow cawed from its perch on one of the trees on the nearby sidewalk. "Okay," Kakashi said, dragging out the word after he had waited long enough. Even as he spoke, his demeanor changed dramatically. Temperature dropped precipitously and a heavy smothering feeling descended upon the three genin. Their chests felt constricted and they could feel immaterial hands crushing their hearts, squeezing the life out of them. The aura of fear was comparable to what Naruto had unleashed for that brief instant in the graduation fight, but while Naruto's had lasted but for a moment, this one showed no sign of petering out. "You think this is a joke?" the Jounin asked. How he managed to be so thoroughly intimidating while reading porn would forevermore be the subject of discussion within Team 7 till the day they died. The temperature dropped even further as Kakashi's glare intensified. "You think being a shinobi is a game?" Sakura's lips started to turn blue. "Pay heed and remember this. I'm your superior and your commander, and you're my soldiers. That means, when I ask a question, you give me crisp answers. When I make a request, you scramble all over yourselves to fulfill it. When I give a command, you make as if God himself had appeared in person before you and ordered you on a holy quest." Team 7 nodded with all the verve they could muster in their condition. Sakura's eyes looked ready to roll in her sockets. Tears brimmed in them and she showed every indication that she wanted to clutch at her throat, but was paralyzed with fear. Sasuke and Naruto were not much better off either, their breaths coming in short gasps as their lips slowly turned blue. Abruptly, the day brightened and the crushing aura lifted. "Good," Kakashi said, smiling in what Team 7 would later learn was one of his defining characteristics. "Let's introduce ourselves. I'll start first." More vigorous nods. The Jounin's eyes narrowed dangerously. "I didn't hear, yes, sensei." "Yes, sensei." Louder. "Yes, sensei," the three chorused loudly. "Excellent." Again, Kakashi's eyes curved again in that imitation of a grin. The genin gulped, wondering what they had done to be saddled with this psychopath. I'm Jounin Hatake Kakashi, your sensei and mentor. I dislike spoiled brats. He shot a meaningful glance in their direction. My likes, you have no need to know. Same with my hobbies. My dream. Ditto. But enough about me. You, the blonde, start. I'm Uzumaki Naruto. I like ramen and training. I dislike weakness. My dream is to protect my precious people and let no harm befall them. Kakashi made to nod, but stopped himself in the nick of time. The boy's dream was admirable. Especially so given the environment he grew up in. Perhaps there was hope for him, after all. But he could not let Naruto know that. Not so soon. Approval should be scant and only grudgingly given this early in training. In the interim, frowns, glares and frequent dress downs would do nicely. Now, if only Sasuke and Sakura had similar aspirations. Raven hair. I'm Uchiha Sasuke. I don't have any likes. I dislike a lot of things. My dream. It's to kill one man and resurrect my clan. This time, Kakashi did not have to restrain his reaction. In fact, he put on his best frown, the one he used whenever one of his subordinates royally screwed the pooch, and stared pointedly at the Uchiha until the boy shifted his gaze to the ground. Mentally sighing, because he knew what he was about to do was akin to cauterizing a deep wound, he cleared his throat. That's nice, he said, but tell me, who is this person you fear so much? Sasuke's head shot up lightning fast at the taunt. Why, you, he growled, forgetting in that instant of anger the lesson he had been taught scarcely a minute earlier. Nah. Kakashi rebuked, disappearing from his perch to appear with his kunai mere millimeters from Sasuke's left pupil. On the one hand, he was disappointed that the hot-headed Uchiha would let his emotions cloud his mind so. On the other, he had been looking for a reason to show his students how insignificant they were in the grand scheme of things. They needed to shed their juvenile arrogance to survive the ordeals ahead, after all. Unwittingly, Sasuke had given Kakashi the perfect reason for the demonstration, and the Jounin knew just the way to drive the nail home in the most unforgettable manner possible. Forgot what I said already, Sasuke-kun? Sasuke froze at the kunai and Kakashi waited a few seconds before pulling it back. For maximum shock value, he needed to effortlessly decimate the Uchiha, and a kunai would give the appearance that Sasuke was enough of a threat to warrant a weapon. Standing up and harshly dragging the boy to his feet by his hair, Kakashi restored the kunai to his thigh holster and forcefully shoved the boy away. Sasuke stumbled forward unsteadily but saved himself from a fall by planting his hands on the concrete to halt his descent. His pate felt raw where Kakashi pulled his hair, but he made scant note of it. His eyes were focused on the Jounin who circled him. When Naruto and Sakura were no longer in the Uchiha's direct line of attack, Kakashi stopped and stared complacently at his charge. You think you can take me on? He asked, his one visible eye half closed. Sasuke seethed, but did nothing. He knew he had reacted badly the first time, but while attacking a superior officer may be excused once, he was sure to get cashiered and dishonorably discharged from the ninja corps if it happened twice. Good, Kakashi said, still speaking in a relaxed voice, his pose loose and neutral, you have some sense. But you thought wrong. I won't file a complaint. And that was all that Sasuke needed to hear. Quick as a coiled snake, he sprung at Kakashi, aiming to cut any of the great arteries in the Jounin's extremities. Even in his madness, he understood after the previous exchange what little chance he had of successfully scoring a hit in Kakashi's center of mass. There were multiple ways that Kakashi could have used to counter the attack. The objective of the lesson, however, enforced certain conditions. The most important one being that he had to make it look effortless on his part. His students had to be put into a state of shock to internalize the lesson and to keep them submissive for the next few crucial weeks while he molded the team. It would take much longer for them to learn to discipline their desires and their hatreds, but that was for the future. Right now, Sasuke and Naruto were little more than crazed animals hiding behind a thin veneer of civilization ready to be shed at the slightest provocation. Sasuke, not surprisingly, even more so than Naruto. Kakashi leaned left and pivoted, easily, controlling Sasuke's thrust by grabbing his wrist. This was yet another thing that only experience could teach you. When confronted with sharp-edged weapons for the first time, people forgot that the weapon is just a tool. They invariably focus on the instrument and give the initiative to the attacking party, forgetting that any weapon is only as dangerous as the man wielding it. Kakashi knew better. Sasuke was armed, yes, but he was shorter, younger, had less stamina, lesser reach, and for all his skill at the art of mayhem, was a novice compared to the Jounin, who had survived a war and was a veteran of many battles and numerous skirmishes. So Kakashi turned, pulling Sasuke with him sharply while simultaneously twisting the Uchiha's hand until it broke. The kunai that was to have been the instrument of Sasuke's doom clattered to the ground and Sasuke stared at his rapidly swelling hand open-mouthed, shock keeping him from feeling the pain for the present. His eyes were still focused on his hand when Kakashi connected with a powerful kick that broke 2 ribs and sent Sasuke into the embrace of unconsciousness. "Well, that's that," he said to his other 2 students, pulling out his beloved book and preparing a shunshin. "We'll start training tomorrow. Training ground 4, 5 a.m. Don't be late or..." "What do you think?" "They'll do fine, Hokage-sama," Kakashi replied. "Sasuke and Naruto have the capacity for violence, but Sakura's a bit submissive in the face of authority. I'm sure she has plenty of aggression stored within her, which I'll strive to bring to the fore." How did the introduction go? Sarutobi had watched the whole introduction, of course. He just wanted Kakashi's perspective on it. "I'd decided to break someone's bones if they agreed to my regimen even before the meeting," the Jounin confided, to give them a preview of the next few weeks. "Even had a team of medics on standby hidden away a couple of blocks away. Sasuke volunteered and I obliged. I'm sure he'll be fine." "The test tomorrow?" "I've decided to forego it. They'll learn teamwork the hard way. With 3 firebrands in the team, I'll have to work them to the ground before they do, but they will. They're your students." Dismissed, Kakashi. Early morning found Naruto, Sasuke and Sakura at training ground 4. An aura of barely restrained anger, murderous in its intensity, surrounded the Uchiha in a shroud, the result of yesterday's humiliation. Sensing how close he was to committing murder, both Naruto and Sakura left him alone. The former lay flat on a patch of grass and fell asleep. The latter leaned against a tree trunk and contented herself with drawing patterns on the dirt. Time passed slowly. As the seconds ticked by, Sasuke's anger, without a natural vent to release pent-up frustrations, skyrocketed to epic proportions. Ignorant of his teammates' fury in the world at large, Naruto lay snoring spread-eagled on the dew. Sakura silently fumed at their irresponsible teacher, but there was the memory of Sasuke's treatment from the day before. Hence, she reined in her temper and kept her outward appearance the very picture of serenity. It was into this tableau that Kakashi shunshined at a few minutes past 8. As his first act of the day, Kakashi kicked Naruto hard, rudely waking Sleeping Beauty from his dreams. Having gained his students' undivided attention with that one act, the Jounin glared at them until they assembled before him. "You disgust me," he spat without preamble. He'd observed them for a few minutes and their apathy disgusted him. "You had 3 hours in the morning. 3 hours that you could have spent training or exercising or teaching each other. But what do you do? Pretty boy, Imovenger there sits brooding about the ass-kicking he received yesterday. Spoiled, blonde brat here takes a nap, snoring like he has no care in the world. And Pinkdress, weakling fangirl plays with sand as if she is a toddler and the training ground her sandbox." A pause. "Right now, you have sunk low and can't sink any lower than you have before my eyes. You stupid brats will get yourselves killed in your first mission on the field and take me with you in the bargain. I'd be crazy to let you guard a dead rat, much less protect my back, because you incompetent imbeciles are worthless, good-for-nothing worms. No, you are not worms. You're worse than worms. You're the stinky shit that even a starving dog would steer away from. Lacking self-confidence to begin with, Sakura looked a little put down at Kakashi's harsh words, but then, she sneaked a look at her teammates and saw them glaring at their teacher. Taking the cue and drawing strength from their reaction, she gave vent to the anger dammed within. Anger at the world, at her life, at her teammates and now, at her bastard of a teacher. Kakashi caught the byplay and his lips curved into a very small smile behind his mask. So long as they saw him as the common enemy, they would cooperate. That was enough for the here and now. Once they learnt what they could achieve by working together, they would do it on their own without a foe to unite them. I'll give you the next 3 hours to prove that you're worth my time. Try hard, try very hard to impress me with your hard work and your dedication. If I so much as feel that you aren't giving me your 110%, then you don't deserve to be genin, much less shinobi of the Konoha Ninja Corps. Now, follow me. We're going to run a lap around the village, he said, leading them on the run. At the end of the 3 hours, Kakashi admitted to himself that he was impressed, though he didn't let the fact slip to his team. Instead, he told them to take a 20-minute break for breakfast and assemble no later than the prescribed time for more training. Sensei, Sakura asked at the end of the first day after Kakashi dismissed Team 7. Yes, Kakashi replied, stopping in his tracks. He turned to face Sakura, sporting that weird little smile on his. Could you? I want to get strong, Sakura said hesitantly. Kakashi nodded enthusiastically. True, Sakura didn't seem to understand that he was already helping her towards her achieving her goal, but he wasn't going to complain. He had only so much time on his hands to teach his genin, and Team 7 needed to start taking the initiative if they ever wanted to become truly strong. You really are the smartest member of the team, he said. He pulled out 3 scrolls from nowhere and offered them to Sakura. Here you go. What are they? One's a scroll on genjutsu theory. It also contains pointers on creating genjutsu. Another talks about medical theory. The last talks about nutrition. Sakura looked thoughtfully at the 3 scrolls. Why nutrition? She asked finally. Are you questioning my judgment? Kakashi asked in reply, narrowing his eyes. It was good that she could ask questions, but did she have the courage to stand up to him? Sakura shook her head. No. Thanks, sensei. Kakashi nodded gruffly, which Sakura took as her cue to make her exit. As she walked away, the jounin followed her with his eyes. He was a little disappointed that she didn't stand her ground, but that was okay. These things take time, after all. Maybe he could start a pool as to how many useless scrolls he can foist on her before she loses her temper with him. The merchant's blood-soaked travel papers said that he was a citizen of Rice Country. He had voided his bowels at the moment of death, but there was no stink. From this and other clues, the ANBU tracker surmised that the merchant had been tortured and strangled to death less than 4 hours earlier. He reported this to his captain. It's 10 hours to the nearest border, the captain observed aloud. If it were Shinobi who had committed the crime, they had too big a lead to catch now. It wasn't any nin that did this, the tracker replied confidently. The victim was garrote with shinobi gear, but it was done haphazardly. There were 7 of them and they took the draft animals with them. The tracks point towards the western hills. Bandits? The captain asked, thoughtfully. Makes sense. Harvest has been disappointing this year, but I doubt these are first-timers. Wasn't there an unsolved murder around these parts last year? One of the others piped up. Come to think of it, it happened not far from here. The captain turned to face the tracker. The team had worked together long enough to understand each other's body language, not that it would have taken a genius to figure out what was going through her mind at that moment. "The tracks are fresh," he told her. "And they've got 3 mules to drag along with them. And they stashed the body, however messily. It was pure happenstance that we happened upon it. Would have walked right by if we didn't have Nose with us," another ANBU observed. Nose, the tracker, shrugged. His keen sense of smell was a boon in his line of work. The fact that he could turn it off whenever he wanted to was an even bigger boon. But it wasn't his nose that had alerted him to the body. The wind had been blowing in the wrong direction for that. No, it was the carrion birds circling overhead that caught his attention and drew him to the bush. "We'll pursue," the captain said, "and when we catch them, we'll put the fear of God in them." 2. Radio in our position and heading. 2 nodded. The captain was right. This wasn't a border patrol and their primary mission wasn't to prevent infiltrators but to keep the peace. And letting the trail of murderers go cold was anything but. 2.5 hours later, as ANBU manacled the genjutsu bandits around her, the captain stared at the scroll in her hands. Its contents were not exactly sensitive, but it had been penned by a Konoha shinobi of Chunin rank or above and it had security seals when she first laid eyes upon it. Seals that she had since broken. The scroll's presence in the merchant's personal belongings raised quite a few interesting questions, however, despite its apparent lack of military value. Why did a rice country merchant have any information regarding Konoha's armed forces on his hands? How did he get his hands on a report submitted to the Hokage? And what was valuable about the scroll? The fact that someone wanted it implied it was, but it had nothing interesting that she could see. "So here we are," Kakashi told his students, as they wound down from the morning jog, "already 3 days into your training. Sakura, you found the scrolls I gave you useful? How come you gave her scrolls and we didn't get them?" Naruto asked indignantly before Sakura could reply to their teacher's question. If Kakashi was going to play favorites, he had better pick the correct one. Namely, Naruto himself. "Because you and Boy Wonder did not ask," Kakashi replied, shooting a cheeky grin at Naruto and Sasuke. He'd asked Sakura the question just so that they could have this conversation as she had strangely not shared her knowledge with her teammates. Moreover, he knew the boys were headstrong enough that they would not read the materials he gave them. It would be a different matter altogether if he enticed them into asking for the scrolls themselves and Sakura stopped hoarding her book smarts, which was why he had to manipulate them. Why, if he maneuvered them often enough, they would start looking underneath the underneath. Wheels within wheels drove the shinobi world and his trusting students took everything at face value. That simply would not do. Not if they were to ever become leaders of men. "Well, we want them," Sasuke huffed, shooting both Sakura and Kakashi dark looks. "That simply will not do," Kakashi thought, sensing the hostility directed Sakura's way. The whole point of antagonizing his team was so that they could grow close to each other and unite against him, after all. "And you shall," he shot back, his eyes curving into a smile even as he planned his next move. A moment later, the bare outline of a plan fell into place and he knew what he had to do. "Let's have a spar. The 3 of you against Lil Old Me." Team 7 stared at the Jounin. This would be their first spar as a team and all 3 genin had been knocked out multiple times and received other painful bodily injuries courtesy of Kakashi in the 3 preceding days that they thirsted for revenge. Then they looked at each other and a single thought passed through their heads. This was their chance to get back at their teacher for all the shit he'd pulled. "The objective of this exercise is to grab this bell from my person," Kakashi continued, seemingly oblivious to the exchange between his students. Truth was, he saw the first signs of teamwork in their interaction and was all the happier for them. "Should you fail it, you'll be marching cross-country tonight. You'll be carrying a backpack and it will be loaded as I see fit. And if we get the bell? You get to sleep under a roof tonight. That sounds fair to you?" It wasn't, but no one in Team 7 was going to object. Not after the last 3 days. Very well. This spar is no holds barred. Come at me with intent to kill or I will kill you. You have 3 hours before the end of the exercise, commencing now. Team 7 fled the clearing at Kakashi's words. The Jounin tracked their tactical retreat for several hundred yards before happily turning his attention back to Aika. From the looks of it, he surmised that they were actually going to sit together and come up with a plan. Maybe he wouldn't have to break bones today, after all. What do we do? Naruto asked as he jumped trees alongside Sasuke and Sakura. We stock up on weapons, come up with a plan and go after the bell, Sakura replied. Naruto made to veer off towards his home before a thought struck him. Where shall we rendezvous and when? We're not splitting up, Sakura replied forcefully. The two boys looked at her. Kakashi-sensei will pick us apart one at a time if we separate, she replied. There was a term for that kind of defeat, but it escaped her just then, and even if it hadn't, she was doubtful if Naruto knew the jargon. She could explain it to him, of course, but they did not have the time for lessons now. What about restocking then? Naruto asked after negotiating a particularly hard jump. I'll share mine, Sasuke replied. The other two looked at him. The Uchiha clan armory is well stocked. I've even kept most of it in good shape. What about? Sakura begun, but something in Naruto's eyes caught her attention. He shook his head in warning. She did not want to go there. Not at this point. Very well, she said, dropping the half-formed question. She observed the slight relaxation in Sasuke's shoulders at her action and congratulated herself for making the right decision to steer away from the treacherous waters. But it made her wonder what Naruto knew about Sasuke's family that she did not, and made a mental note to pursue the matter further at her leisure. Here we are, Sasuke said, as he swung open the doors to what was, when his clan was still alive, the second largest armory in Konoha. Naruto made sure to catch Sasuke's eyes before nodding once and stepped inside. Sakura bit her lips to stop herself from asking the one question she was aching to ask and followed the blonde in. From her observations so far, she was sure that Sasuke would not appreciate her questions about his clan right now. The compound gave her the creeps, and she did not doubt anymore that there was something terribly wrong with the Uchiha clan. It was not just the cobwebs on the windows of most houses and the dirt and grime everywhere that clued her in either. There had been no guards at the gates, and she hadn't seen a single soul since they entered the premises. The latter was probably the weirdest thing of all. It was almost as if the whole clan was dead and gone. In silence, the genin helped themselves to their favorite wares. A short blade mounted in plain scabbard drew Naruto's attention, and he pointed it to Sasuke. What is it? It's a chisakatana, Sasuke replied. Can I? You want it? Naruto nodded. Take it. Its purpose is wasted in this armory. Thanks, Naruto said, reaching out for the blade. He lifted it in his hands and joined Sakura and Sasuke on the floor. The sword was useless in the coming fight, but he planned to take it home with him. Now, what do we do? We plan. I think we should make one probe and one all-out attack, Sakura answered. Won't work, Sasuke replied. Why? Knowing Kakashi-sensei, he'll probably break us during the probe. We'll have one chance and we can't afford to waste it. Worried about the march? Naruto asked, grinning at Sasuke. As if you aren't, Sasuke replied, but there was no heat behind his words. What if we convince him that the main attack is the probe? That would work, Sakura replied thoughtfully. But any ideas as to how we'll do it? Well, it's been nearly 2.5 hours, Kakashi thought as he flipped another page. Either his students were going to attack soon or they were not. If the latter, he was definitely going to break a few bones when he caught the brats. He would withhold treatment and then take them on that trek, broken bones and all. Preferably through the land just north of the village wall. There was lots of brush in that rocky terrain. In the darkness, Team 7 was bound to have a few falls. With fractured limbs, it would be a painful and unforgettable lesson to never take his words in vain. At that moment, Kakashi's vision flickered slightly. Mentally scolding himself for not trusting his students more, he put his book away and shined out of the clearing. No need to show the young impressionable minds how to break a genjutsu so early in the exercise. Also, he wanted to teach them the lesson that for maximum effect, you wanted to hoard the most potent weapons in your arsenal and use them only when the enemy least expected it. And in this exercise, with Sakura having upped the ante with genjutsu, knowledge about how to break one would be a powerful one. That must have been their probe. They had no one to pin me while applying the genjutsu, which implies they did not predict that I would run. But that's okay because they surprised me a bit as well. Hell, I'm amazed Sakura managed to get the fundamentals so fast, though I suppose I shouldn't be. She's as much a prodigy with chakra control as the other two are in their respective disciplines. But that makes 2 holes in their plan so far. And, here we go. Looks like Sasuke and Naruto are leading and Sakura is staying behind, which is tactically sound. As before, Sakura, who was hiding behind one of the trees that bordered the clearing, struck the first blow. She used a genjutsu that caused bright lights to flash in Kakashi's vision. Her technique was weak and for all its usefulness in battle, had several glaring holes that he could exploit. Kakashi, however, did not. It was better to let his students think that they was doing well at this point in the engagement. It would make his counterattack, when it came, all the more effective. Even as Kakashi reeled, he did not even have to put on an act because Sakura's technique disoriented him. He noted that Naruto and Sasuke were also affected by the illusion. Naruto, it seemed, was unusually vulnerable to genjutsu. He stumbled and the Jounin decided at that moment to target the blonde first. But before Kakashi could connect with his kick, Sakura used Kawarimi to replace Naruto with a log. Kakashi's kick sent the log flying into Sasuke, who dodged it by a hair's width thanks to his Sharingan. The move unbalanced the Uchiha a little, however. Naruto was at least 40 yards away, too far to interfere without resorting to ninjutsu, which was his greatest weakness, or thrown weapons, which Kakashi could block, and the Jounin knew Sakura was near the end of her reserves. So he took the opportunity as presented and body-checked Sasuke as the latter came in with fists swinging. The force of impact knocked the breath out of the Uchiha. His rude introduction to the ground broke his recently healed ribs and the hard blow to his head as it hit the compacted earth sent him into the blissful embrace of oblivion. Having incapacitated one of his opponents, Kakashi rolled with his momentum, successfully evading Naruto's shuriken. He regained his feet and flipped backwards twice to avoid more projectiles from both Naruto and Sakura, the latter having finally come out of hiding. Sakura was the weaker of the two, but her genjutsu gave her an advantage that Naruto did not have. At once, she was the vital link that could give Naruto the edge he needed to grab the bell, and she was also the weak connection that could bring him down. Naturally, Kakashi feinted an attack on Naruto. Sakura, with what must have the last erg of her chakra reserves, reinforced her genjutsu to disorient the Jounin. She tottered on her feet as her last-ditch effort took her to the edge of chakra exhaustion. Kakashi stumbled as he went temporarily blind, and Naruto seized the opportunity with a mad rush to grab the bells that left him completely open to attack. But Kakashi knew this would happen and, having planned for just this eventuality, used Kawarimi to escape Naruto. Sakura's genjutsu collapsed then, even as she herself fell to her knees gasping for breath. Kakashi's carefully aimed kunai pierced her right arm just above her elbow and she screamed in agony. Naruto, who had by this point reversed momentum with skillful use of his legs and kunai, threw shuriken at his teacher and came rushing in right behind them. Lightning fast, Kakashi's kunai flashed in the path of the shuriken and deflected the offending weapons. Unfazed, Naruto thrust his kunai at his teacher's chest with one last burst of speed, but the teacher was ever faster than the student. There was an audible snap as Naruto's hand broke and Kakashi kicked him down. With his foot on the young Uzumaki's rear as befit a conqueror, the Jounin lifted his beloved Ika out of storage and began to read. Good thing I didn't cancel the genjutsu. Gives me an ace in the hole for tomorrow. Or maybe not. I have to teach Naruto how to counter genjutsu or he's dead meat the first time he runs into an expert on a mission. The senior medic Nin in the medical emergency response team pulled Kakashi to the other side of the clearing and glared at him. In the background, his two assistants attended to the assorted wounds inflicted on the genin. This is too much, he spoke quietly so that his voice wouldn't carry to either his assistants or their patients. You aren't training these kids. You're torturing them. Kakashi eyed his accuser lethargically. I appreciate your concern for my students, he said, but I'll remind you they are my students. Your job is to heal them, which I can see you're very good at. Do yours and leave me to mine. You're being too harsh on them. Nonsense. They're ninja. What good are they if they cannot endure a little discomfort? Broken bones and 2-inch deep flesh wounds are hardly little discomforts for 12-year-old kids. I would rather they suffer these indignities by my hands than have their throats slit later. If that's your answer, I'm going to report this to the Hokage. Do as you see fit. I'll ask the chief medic Nin to suspend support for your team. Kakashi's eyes narrowed imperceptibly. You'll need authorization from the Hokage for that, he pointed out. You won't get it. And if you try to present it as a fait accompli, I will come for you. The Hokage will even sanction it for my genin. This is intolerable. You can't threaten me. For my students, I can and I will. I will file a report. Kakashi shrugged. As I'd already said, do as you will. You're being stupid. Think about your words and actions. Once your people are done, leave. I have to conduct an after-action review for the exercise for my team. The medic Nin shook his head and departed. Looking at his retreating back, Kakashi muttered, I've had more than a decade to think back on my words and actions. Perhaps I'm doing things wrong, but I'd rather do the wrong thing than not do anything at all. Sarutobi stared long and hard at the report about the dead merchant from Rice Country on his desk. It was late in the evening, but thanks to ANBU's fortuitous discovery, what had been a long day was about to get even longer. While it was common for nations to steal academy graduation reports of competitors to keep an eye out for fresh talent, it was usually done for a whole graduating class. What alarmed him about the incident was that in this particular instance someone wanted information about a specific team of genin. That meant this was no simple fact-finding mission, which implied there was some other objective behind it. Problem was, there was not one but two promising genin in the particular team in question, and if their teachers' glowing reports were to be believed, the third one was just as interesting as the other two. Fortunately for Konoha, the gods of fortune had smiled upon her and bequeathed a favor once again in her time of need. This time, the remarkable string of coincidence that led to the merchant's death at the hands of the bandits and their subsequent capture by ANBU had also delivered a gift to Konoha's counterintelligence that was almost too good to be true. And while Sarutobi had always been wary about gift horses, even the commander of ANBU counterintelligence, one of the most healthily paranoid individuals in all of Konoha, had been unable to smell any traps hidden within this Trojan horse. Unfortunately, the ramifications of the report were mostly bad. It meant that one or both of the senior Chunin tutors within the academy were compromised and had been traitors for God knows how long. On the bright side, the very nature of the special document discovered on the merchant's person narrowed down the list of suspects to those two as the primary ones and their colleagues at the academy as the secondary ones. Sarutobi consoled himself that as bad as the prospect of treason in the academy was, it could have been a lot worse. If the document had gone through the normal channels, the loyalty of practically the entire Shinobi administrative establishment would have come under question, and that was a headache he did not want. Ninjato. The Counterintelligence Bureau ANBU literally melted out of the woodwork. Yes, Hokage-sama. I'm authorizing your operation. I entrust you to ensure that adequate security precautions are taken for the duration of this mission. I don't like traitors near our security archives. Any more than I like security leaks. Even less, in fact. Both the primary suspects are weak in genjutsu, Ninjato replied. I'll put my genjutsu specialists on the security detail. You have carte blanche on this operation, the Hokage told him in return. Find out who the traitor is and report to me. We'll decide what to do from there. It'd be wise to leave him where he is, Hokage-sama. Better a spy you know than a spy you don't. And where there's a spy, there'll be a ring, the Hokage replied. I know, Ninjato. But there are things that you can't risk, like the safety and loyalty of the children at the academy. Find out who the spy's master is. If it's no one of import, you have my official sanction to arrange an accident. Yes, Hokage-sama. Just borrowing Naruto for a while. The man who abandoned his village only to found a new one stared down at the flickering shadows cast by the torch mounted directly behind him. A part of him was much captivated by the dancing shadows that played to lights yang. Thus, in the deep silence of his underground lair, the man considered things that were, things that are and things that will be. Finally, after many minutes of contemplation, he chose to acknowledge the one kneeling in supplication before his throne. Sakan. Yes, Orochimaru-sama, Sakan answered his master's call in a voice that brimmed with reverence, and unconditional devotion and loyalty. What news from Suna? Yondaime Kazekage did not commit himself to the offer of alliance, master. Orochimaru nodded. He hadn't expected the mission to accomplish anything concrete so early. The Kazekage would be the greatest fool on earth if he expressed interest to the rogue Sanin's overtures so early in the game when he had so much to gain by playing his cards close to his heart. But, he prompted. The Kazekage tried to mask it, but he is much taken by the idea. He's caught between a rock and a hard place, and we offer him the much-needed hammer. Reasons for your conclusion? Suna has been abandoned to die on the vine by their daimyo. He has been cuckolding them for years now, but until recently, he always left enough of the pie for Suna to survive, if only as a pauper. Now, Suna's economy is showing signs of teetering on the edge of the abyss and will collapse without succor. They are left with the option to pursue several approaches that boil down to these two choices: break the daimyo's power or strike at Konoha, the other root cause of their current predicament. Until our offer of alliance, both options were tantamount to the same thing. The latter would result in a quick death in battle as opposed to a slow death by economic collapse because of the former. The Kazekage has tried for years to take the middle road and broker peace between his village and the daimyo. He has tried unsuccessfully to impress upon his ruler Suna's necessity to the nation's defense. His words have fallen on deaf ears so far. He knows, as do we, that the time fast approaches when his hands are tied and he is forced to act. In Suna's weakened condition, he would be a fool to strike against Konoha. Suna would be crushed. This leaves then, the other option, removing the daimyo. Yondaime Kazekage is a patriot, Orochimaru pointed out gleefully. He knew all the arguments why Suna would accept the alliance. It was his plan to get Suna to betray Konoha, after all, but he wanted to test Sakan. The young guard was not privy to the debate regarding the operation, even though he was Oto's ambassador to Suna. It is precisely because he is a patriot that Yondaime Kazekage has been hesitant to assassinate the daimyo. But until our intervention, all other doors were closed to him, and assassination followed by seppuku to atone for his sins was the only option that remained open. With our offer, he does not have to strip the country and his own village of their leaders. He will see reason and do as he must. Orochimaru nodded. If there had been any uncertainty about the wisdom of choosing Sakan to command the embassy to Suna, this conversation put paid to it. Sakan, he was sure, would shape to be a good administrator in the glory days of Oto to come. "Leave me, Sakan. You have done well," he said. Sakan bowed to his master and exited the audience chamber, a smile on his face. He was glad that he'd read the boring report Taiyuya stole from Kimamaro's desk. XXXXX frightful hate and self-centered egotism combined with an unquenchable hunger for power defined Mizuki's personality. Or so said his psych report. The assessment was accurate for the most part. Mizuki was an individual more concerned with personal power than the welfare of the village. Others around him believed he was loyal to Konoha, but Mizuki was loyal to Mizuki alone and no one else. He considered those who willingly laid down their lives for causes fools. And though he rarely showed it, always acting the proper, caring teacher, Mizuki could, and often did, hate with a frightening intensity. He hated a great many people within Konoha and without. He hated those who thought him weak, made him appear weak, stood in his way, or looked down upon him. Naruto had a special place on that list because Mizuki remembered how the Kyuubi's attack reduced him to a quivering, sobbing mass as a genin. His pride could not forgive the demon for that humiliation and by proxy, Naruto. Mizuki's superiors considered him a security risk because of his flawed personality. For the longest time, they let him stew as a chunin because of it. He had the potential to become a decent jounin, they privately admitted. But while he lacked neither ambition nor aggression, they were wary of entrusting him with the duty and responsibilities that went with the rank because of his untrustworthy nature. In the end, they decided that in a time of peace, the risks of promotion far outweighed the returns. In fact, it was only because of a bureaucratic screw-up that Mizuki became a teacher. The concerned official took ill the week the academy requested for a new pedagogue. The sick bureaucrat's young and inexperienced assistant, lacking the security clearance to Mizuki's psych report, assigned the recently promoted chunin in the middle of an RNR cycle. No one realized the mistake until a week later when a concerned ANBU raised the issue with her commander, who escalated it to the highest levels. In the end, after much debate and numerous calls for Mizuki's dismissal, the Hokage overruled his advisors. He ordered increased surveillance and gave his ANBU reports permission to terminate the chunin with prejudice if they observed him exerting a wrong influence on the students. The spies were called off when 3 months went by without Mizuki doing anything suspicious. ANBU Corps' mission plate was filled to bursting and there were only so many of the Hokage's most trusted assassins to carry them out. As later events would highlight, the decision to call off the hounds was a regrettable one. The Hokage's orders were sound on paper and he gave them only because his intuition told him the report may be wrong. But even the most carefully honed instinct can sometimes lead one astray, which they did in this instance, proving once and for all to Sarutobi's detractors that the professor was neither omniscient nor infallible. Apart from the political capital it cost the third, the incident would continue to haunt him throughout the waning days of his reign. His opponents would always fall back on it as a last come about to rally their ranks and raise doubts within his. But then, as Sarutobi himself admitted to his confidants, sometimes there was no helping these things. Trust in their subordinates was one of the key differentiators that separated the Hokages from the other Kages. It was even one of Konoha's biggest strengths against its enemies and competitors. After all, any structure built on suspicion works as much against itself as against its enemies and is ultimately self-defeating in the long run. In Mizuki's case, as it was general knowledge that only the most trusted up-and-coming officers were even allowed near trainees, he spent the first few months gloating about his posting as well as the accompanying increase in status and was all joy and smiles. So great was his high, that it was some time before he thought of using his position to his advantage and further his own ambition. By then, ANBU HQ had called off surveillance and Mizuki was free, a wolf in sheep's clothing to prey on innocent lambers. He used that freedom to spy on his students and reported on them for money and vague promises of power. Until one very unlucky rice country merchant fell into the clutches of a ruthless bunch of bandits who were really farmers by vocation, but who also had no qualms about spilling blood for a little extra cash. Tonight was the happiest night of Mizuki's life. After 2 months of diligent work as one of the Hokage's many errand boys, his prayers were answered finally. This very night, he was alone with the vaunted scrolls of the third with but a somnolent guard between him and the whole wide world beyond. How did this turn of events come to be? Earlier in the week, Mizuki had received a missive from Resources informing him that he was on temporary loan to the archiving section as part of the effort to organize the Hokage's collection. On reading his orders, the Chunin had been so taken by the possibility of getting his hands on all the techniques and intel in the library that it did not even strike him once that the assignment was an entrapment. Suppressing the conflicting emotions, ecstasy and terror, threatening to drown his heart, Mizuki extended his arms slowly toward the scroll of forbidden techniques. This action would cut the Gordian knot, he knew, which explained the shaking. In the past, people had been killed for looking this particular scroll the wrong way, and shinobi who tried to steal it were given the full royal treatment. The lucky ones were fed poison to suppress their chakra and impaled on a long stake. The unlucky ones were also fed poison to suppress their chakra but were either impaled on a short stake or crucified by tying them to a cross. Mizuki himself had seen 2 crucifixions himself, and as the memory of those poor bastards struck him, he suppressed a shiver. He consoled himself against his fears by telling himself that it was a good thing he had the perfect plan and had been granted the right opportunity, or even the rich rewards to be had by stealing the scroll would be outweighed by the threat of discovery and punishment. Grabbing the document, Mizuki laid it on the ground alongside a miniature scroll less than 2 centimeters tall. His scroll had seals of a special sort used for copying text from drawn on its outer face. He bit into a bit of bark to keep the screams down, summoned a minute quantity of chakra and activated the seals. A phantom pain akin to clutching red-hot iron erupted on both hands. It lasted mere moments, but very intense. Only the fact that Mizuki knew to expect it and the extensive training he'd received on ignoring pain kept him from fainting straight away. Still, when the deed was done, he spit out the bark and collapsed gasping on the floor. It was minutes before he mastered himself enough to stand up. He examined his palms, which were reddening already in response to the imaginary pain. Tomorrow, he would need to burn both appendages for real so that he could receive medical attention and escape suspicion, remote though that possibility was. But now. Mizuki smiled at the direction that thought led. Now, it was time to celebrate. He returned the scroll of forbidden techniques to its place on the shelf and hid the bark close to the middle of the pile of thrash in the garbage bin. Finally, he picked up the miniature scroll and secured it in a hollow metal cocoon. Screwing the container shut, he swallowed it whole with a liberal glass of water. Then, he strolled out of the room, wished the guards standing outside good night and signed himself out for the day. In the darkness that descended upon the room as the door closed behind Mizuki, a masked figure melted out of the wall. Rat, worm has left the office. Be warned that he's carrying contraband, identified as illegal copy of scroll of forbidden techniques in his person, a masculine voice muffled by the mask whispered into the air. He paused for a few seconds to listen to the reply from the other end. Relax, Rat. Idiot used sealed parchment to make the copy. Yeah, that's why I called him an idiot, but I'll grant you his plan was a good one within the boundaries of his limited knowledge. Yeah, I'll file the report and inform the captain. We need to keep a sharp eye on the treasonous bastard in the coming days lest we miss the drop. Unknown to Mizuki, the seals that were the cornerstone of his plan could be countered with seals of a higher order that was forbidden knowledge to all but the Hokage's most trusted subordinates. Those very same seals protected the scroll of forbidden techniques. The Chunin did not know, but his stolen copy contained a mess of lines that meant zilch. Today had started like the day before and every day that preceded it for the past 3 months. Naruto woke up, finished his morning ablutions, ran across the rooftops to the training ground, and trained with Sasuke and Sakura until Kakashi showed up. It deviated from that point on, with Kakashi abandoning the now almost traditional morning exercise regimen for something new. "Today," he said, "we'll break the pattern just for the sheer randomness of it." Kakashi's words did not fool his students for a minute. Bitter experience had taught them that the Jounin did not do random. Hard toil and spilled blood had imprinted in their psyche the need to look underneath the underneath. Now, they searched for hidden motivations even in the mundane interactions of everyday life. And training with their mentor was anything but. Even the bright and friendly grin on Hataki's masked face did not lull them into a sense of security. That grin had heralded nothing but misery, fractures, contusions and whatnot in the last 3 months, and they knew that the pattern wasn't going to change today. If Kakashi read the slight tightening of his students' shoulders that gave away what their faces did not, he chose to not comment on it. There were things that only experience could teach, after all, and this was one of them. "What's the plan, sensei?" Naruto asked. "A day-long bell-grabbing exercise. It's a test of stamina, endurance, battle prowess, tactical, strategic and operational acumen, and of course, your will to survive." A pause. "Well, mainly, your will to survive," Kakashi added as an afterthought. "Every day with you is a battle of survival," Sakura replied, glaring at Kakashi and meeting his eyes challengingly. "Ah, but you're mistaken, Sakura-kun." Sakura looked askance at Kakashi as he moved to stand on Team 7's right flank. Her teammates followed their sensei with their eyes as well, but did not break discipline otherwise. Yet another painful lesson had taught them to never take their eyes off their opponent and to never break ranks before being dismissed. They were, as Kakashi put it, soldiers, damn it, and had better learn military tradition, or so help me God, I'll bury your stinky, putrescent, no good carcasses where you stand. Kakashi smiled behind his mask at yet another important lesson successfully imparted to his students. "You mean you're actively going to try to kill us?" Naruto announced. At his words, the tightening around the shoulders disappeared on all 3 members of Team 7. The way they carried themselves looked and felt totally relaxed. It was as if they had not a care in the world. Kakashi knew better. This was what he trained them for, after all. Team May 7th fool all civilians except that 1 in a 10,000 oddity and even most Jounins, but they did not have the practice to pull one over a highly skilled veteran like him. A few years down the line, they probably would be able to, but right now, with no one else's influence to alter the personalities he'd sculpted from the base material, he could read them like an open book. So Kakashi knew this was the calm before the storm. This was Team 7 ready, willing and straining at their leash to let loose the wrath of heaven as soon as their master pointed them to a target. "You're right," Kakashi told Naruto, knowing that with those words, he'd set his war hounds on himself. But Team 7 did not move. Kakashi hadn't announced the conditions for the exercise after all. The Jounin moved behind them to threaten their rear and spoke, "The rules are simple. 3 against 1. No holds barred. Exercise ends at sunset or if all 3 of you die." Pause. An errant breeze rustled the leaves on the crest of a nearby tree. Katan, Gokakyu no Jutsu. All hell broke loose. It was fast approaching twilight and Sakura stared up at the bright blue sky partially hidden by the green tree canopy. Her parched throat hurt and it took some effort to swallow. A sparrow or something else sang in the background. She really could not tell which. Pause. Sakura's head rolled down. She was too weak to support it for long and she stared at her blood-encrusted hand holding her intestines from slipping out of her abdomen. She had tried what she could to heal the mortal wound and fortunately, the intestines were not perforated, but she did not have enough chakra. She was way behind Sasuke in that area, who was in turn, leagues behind Naruto. Which is really less than useful in this situation, she thought to herself. Realizing that her mind was wandering, a sure sign of her worsening condition, Sakura tried to summon the last residual chakra left in her body. She grasped hold of it and, reaching behind, placed her hand over the spleen. Grimacing at the effort even that little movement took, she bit her lips. She dared not cry out in pain lest she give away her position to Kakashi, who really was trying to kill her, and applied herself to the arduous and painful procedure. Forcing the spleen repeatedly to produce mature red blood cells, like she had a 1 in 100 chance of ruining the organ, but there was a chance she would slip into shock and lose consciousness without it and all the Gatorade she drank. And with Kakashi on the warpath till the conclusion of the exercise, she needed to be awake and in control of her mind. If the Jounin happened upon her while she was passed out, there was a chance he would slit her throat the way he had been carrying on since morning. And that was going to happen over her dead body. She had wasted too much time and effort surviving Team 7's psychopath teacher and his insane training regimen to die now. Naruto gingerly tried rotating his left wrist to see if the break was properly healed from the last skirmish as he and Sasuke hid behind 2 separate tree trunks, blocking Kakashi's access to Sakura. It was. He did not understand why he could heal so fast, but never before had he been more thankful for the ability than today. Without it and Sasuke's Sharingan, Team 7 would have been dead 10 times over. Of course, without Sakura's suicidal holding action in those first few dreadful minutes of the exercise, they may very well have died under the press of the Jounin's initial assault, but she had borne the brunt of the attack and bought them the precious time they needed to survive. And now, it was up to her teammates to save her from their murderous teacher. Naruto flashed hand signs in battle language at his warrior brother and nodded at the reply. Kakashi was not yet so close that they had to attack immediately. Naruto used the breather to check his weapons pouch and resize his dress. It was torn into tatters after so many hours of battle against an opponent of Hataki's caliber. He was bloody, dirty, hungry, thirsty, angry, and afraid and a whole lot of other things that he could not even put words on, but the will to fight and protect ran like an all-consuming blaze in his veins. So long as even a drop of blood flowed in them, Naruto knew, Kakashi would not touch a single hair on Sakura's or Sasuke's shoulder. "Hold it, sensei," Naruto shouted, stepping into the open with Sasuke when Kakashi limped out of the brush towards them. The Jounin sported bloody field bandages on his left leg and right shoulder, courtesy of Sasuke and Naruto, in payback for gutting Sakura. That particular action had cost Naruto a broken rib that had since healed and a deep gash on Sasuke's right cheek, but the two deemed it fair exchange for what Kakashi did to their teammate. "Ah, Naruto." "Sasuke," Kakashi nodded at them. "Silence. Do not approach any further," Sasuke warned, breaking the pause. Kakashi looked the raven-haired genin over. The boy looked much the worse for wear, but while his body may fail him yet, there was still plenty of fight left in his eyes. "You're bleeding and at the end of your reserves," he said in his most reasonable voice. "Why do you protect her? She's a weakling who couldn't last even a handful of minutes in the fight and got knocked out early in the exercise." "She's our teammate," Naruto replied. "Then, we mean it, sensei. Do not approach any further." "She's a weakling," Kakashi repeated his earlier words. "And weaklings pull you down." The air seemed to freeze as the Jounin unleashed the full force of his killing intent. Never before had it felt so powerful and murderous in any exercise conducted so far. The insane desire to rend, dismember and kill was almost a physical thing. It was almost as if they were in the presence of death itself. "Choose, boys. Sakura or your life." Naruto's reply was a massive gokakyu. He ran through the seals too fast for human eyes to follow. At the same time, Sasuke replaced himself with a kawarimi to reappear on Kakashi's left flank. The huge ball of fire that spewed from Naruto's mouth cut off any possible avenues of escape to the right for the Jounin. Most Nin would have been caught flat-footed by a two-pronged attack, but the former ANBU commander was not most Nin. He spotted at least 3 holes in the trap, but instead of using them to escape his students, he used the biggest flaw in Naruto's chosen technique to counterattack. The blonde was still inexperienced enough with the Katan Jutsu that he had to stand still while using it, and an immobile defendant in the open is at a huge disadvantage against a mobile attacker. So, Kakashi made a beeline for Naruto, completely ignoring Sasuke and the wall of flames closing in on his person. With one last burst of pure speed, he slipped under the inferno and penetrated Naruto's guard. Before the genin could raise his fists to defend himself, Kakashi chambered a textbook punch and slammed it into his student's chest. Fortunately, Naruto had quit the ninjutsu when he moved to block the Jounin's attack and thus, escaped having his lungs burnt to cinder, as had nearly happened with Sasuke during the graduation fight. Unfortunately, the force of the punch was enough that Naruto went crashing into a tree hard enough to shake it. As Naruto thumped against the hard trunk, Sasuke's kunai struck Kakashi in the back of his thigh. The genin's aim was spot on, and the kunai should have split Kakashi's femur in two, rendering him immobile and winning Team 7 a very hard-fought Pyrrhic victory. Only, instead of collapsing like a sack of meal, Kakashi puffed out of existence in a little cloud of smoke. It took a moment for the realization to dawn in Sasuke's head, but he understood what happened. As soon as he became cognizant, his eyes widened as the ramifications of Kakashi's subterfuge struck him. The way to Sakura was unguarded and unprotected, with neither of her guardians in a position to intercept her killer before he got to her. "Naruto," he shouted, "get up." Kakashi pulled a lid over our eyes and went hunting after Sakura. Naruto groggily made to get to his feet, but his footing was unsteady. The crash had wounded him badly. Sasuke spared his teammate a glance and took off running. "I'm going ahead to run interference. Join me fast or we're lost." "So here we are," Kakashi said, not unkindly. It had taken him less time than he thought it would to find his pink-haired student in this stretch of forest, but more than enough time had passed that either Naruto or Sasuke should have blocked him. They had not. So, what was happening with those two? Any last wishes? Sakura glared defiantly at the Jounin. There were flies around her, attracted by all the blood, and the ground underneath was soaked with blood. She knew as he did that with her wounds, she was in no condition to fight. It must have cost her a major chunk of what little strength she had left, but she held a kunai in her free hand to defend herself. Her other hand, of course, was busy staunching the blood and keeping her intestines from slipping out. Kakashi shrugged. It wasn't as if he'd expected Sakura to silently submit to an execution. "For what it's worth, I'll make it quick and painless," he said, and threw 2 shuriken aimed at her throat. In her condition, it was possible she could block one, but there was no chance in hell she could block 2. With that throw, Sakura was, for all intents and purposes, a corpse. Only, Sasuke was suddenly there. Having shined in, he protected her with his body, taking both shuriken in his back. The thrown weapons bit deep into his muscles. He reached behind and pulled them out, screaming in agony at the pain. "Sasuke," Kakashi said, sounding amiable as if he were discussing the weather, "get out of the way and I'll let you live. Sakura's life is the only price I demand of Team 7 for your abysmal performance today." "Over my dead body," Sasuke gasped out, slowly getting to his feet. "Sasuke-kun." Sakura whispered as she saw the cuts and scrapes and blood on him. "Don't protect her, Sasuke. It's not worth it. Save yourself." "Go to hell," Sasuke grated out in a stronger voice as the blinding pain receded a bit. Kakashi's eyes narrowed. "As you wish. You'll both die today," he said, and reached for his weapons pouch. But before he could pull out his kunai, an animalistic cry of fury erupted through the brush, and a chakra, the likes of which Kakashi had felt only once, exploded to his left. Kakashi turned and Naruto came barreling in, his body shrouded in the Kyuubi's accursed chakra. The next moment, a punch that would have killed the Jounin had he not cushioned it with chakra smashed into his face, and he went barreling into a bush about 50 yards away. Kakashi calmly rose up, his whole carriage screaming nonchalance, and brushed a few of Speck's dirt off his shoulders. Naruto faced down the Jounin with ethereal red chakra blazing all around him. "You stay away from them, you hear," Naruto said, radiating pure menace and megadoses of killing intent. "You stay away from Sakura and Sasuke or I'll rip you to shreds." "Excellent. You've all learned teamwork and esprit de corps." Finally, Kakashi replied calmly. His own team had failed long before this very test on a real battlefield before he learned sense, but his students did not. There would never be a tragedy like Obito in this team. "Now, Naruto, release your hold on the Kyuubi's chakra. The medics will absolutely refuse to approach this place while you're using it." A second later, the Kyuubi's chakra gutted around Naruto as his strength failed him finally. The boy swayed on his feet and fell down, unconscious. "You broke my law," the Sandaime grated, looking quiet, displeased with Kakashi. "It had to be done. They are his teammates and a secret of this magnitude would have destroyed everything I've tried so hard to build. You put your life in danger." Naruto did not know it himself until today. Be glad his team does not hate him. Else I would have you crucified for doing such a thing. "I knew they would not," Kakashi said, waving aside the threat. "You couldn't have been sure," Sarutobi said pointedly. Kakashi smiled. "They're my team, Hokage-sama. I was sure." The Hokage finally relaxed and shook his head. "You'll be the death of me," he grumbled. "I must have been insane when I gave you Team 7. Silence. "What did the medic say about Naruto?" the Hokage asked, switching topics. Kakashi looked uncomfortable. "He's lost a lot of blood and his skull was holed. If he'd been a normal kid, he'd have died instantaneously. As it is, he'll pull through." "Have you considered what'd have happened if Naruto had died?" Kakashi nodded. "I have, Hokage-sama." Sarutobi stared. "You should have been a bit less zealous, Kakashi. Your actions risked the release of the Kyuubi." "The thought did cross my mind," Kakashi agreed. "Reflect on your actions, Kakashi. I expect you to show more forethought in the future." "Yes, Hokage-sama." Moving on, what's Sakura's prognosis? "The medic said she'd lost a lot of blood but she'll survive without any long-term complications, Hokage-sama. They said that she'd managed to treat herself in a very imaginative way. To quote one of the doctors, she's definitely a genius in the making." "Good. Team 7 will be struck in the hospital for 3 more days. I would like to take them on their first mission as soon as they recover." "Drank?" Sarutobi asked, hoping that Kakashi would see the wisdom of it. "Crank." Sarutobi thought about it. Ordinarily, he would refuse, but then, after the nightmare Kakashi had put his students through, they were something else. "So, I have an escort mission to Land of Waves in 4 days requested by a bridge builder named Tazuna. Team 7 foot LL take that. Anything else?" "No, Hokage-sama." "Dismissed, Kakashi." After Kakashi shined out, Sarutobi turned his attention to the confidential report on his desk. He'd considered assassinating Mizuki, but that wasn't really a choice. While the man had tried to steal the scroll of forbidden techniques to sell to Konoha's enemies, a crime that warranted death sentence, the identity of those enemies precluded his execution. All but one of the 4 controls he passed information to through his merchant spies were known associates of Orochimaru, Sarutobi's own prodigal student and rank criminal who hated Konoha and everything from Konoha with a passion. Orochimaru's interest in Team 7 was a big cause of concern and the third just knew that nothing good was going to come off it. Thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed it. Make sure to like and subscribe, and don't forget to share this video with your friends. Guys, make sure to help the author by visiting the link in the description. This is Fox Sage, and I'm signing off.